Hi, this is Pat Duckworth, the author of Hot Women Rock, How to Discover Your Midlife Entrepreneurial Mojo. And I'm sorry if I sound a bit like I'm yodeling this morning. It's just that I'm a little bit allergic to all the crops that have come out around us. It's lovely to live in the countryside, but sometimes you feel the effects of it. Anyway, my guests come to me from all different sources, and my guest today I've hardly even been able to talk to yet, not just because my voice has gone. So I am fascinated to hear the answers to the questions that I'm going to ask. So my guest is a positive psychologist, international best-selling author, a motivational speaker, the CEO and trailblazer behind the Women of Contribution movement. With over 20 years experience inspiring, empowering, and supporting women through coaching and her work as an entrepreneur. In 2016, her life changed dramatically following a vision to create a worldwide movement and community of contribution and collaboration. Through her Pay It Forward series, Notes to My Younger Self books, she coaches legacy entrepreneurs to step forward as leaders for change, with one aim in mind: to impact on 1 billion lives worldwide. That's what we call a big vision. She's now on a mission to inspire all women to leave an impactful footprint through collaboration and sharing their gifts with the world, as she knows that united we're strong, together we can make a difference, one woman at a time. So it's a big welcome today to Kezia Luckett. Hi Kezia, how are you?
Good, thank you. Lovely to be here.
Well, I can't wait to hear more about you. So without further ado, tell us about the start of your journey. What did you do when you first left education?
Oh my goodness. Well, I'll be totally honest with you. I had not a clue on what it was I wanted to do when I left school. I think, like many of us, I had hated school. I'd been bullied throughout the whole of my school year. And to be honest with you, I ended up, believe it or not, doing hairdressing and beauty therapy. So I'm actually a trained hairdresser and beauty therapist.
Well, you're looking pretty good, so it must have worked.
And then I went into working on the counters. I worked for a company called Charles of Ritz, and I did that for, I think, about 2 years. I did really well at it. And then I split up with a boyfriend at the time and just wanted to escape, just wanted to get away. And it was at that time somebody introduced me to nannying in America, and I applied and I moved over there. I think I applied in September, and by the January I'd moved to America, to Atlanta, Georgia, and remained there for 4 years. So I did the nannying, and then I went back to university and got a degree. So yes, not probably what everybody was expecting, but that's part of our journey, isn't it?
It is. It isn't always straightforward. Often these journeys are quite messy, and that's one of the messages of all of this, is that don't think this is a straight line from A to B. There's going to be some little whirls and diversions along the way. So you say you moved to Georgia. Where were you brought up?
So originally I was brought up just outside Brighton, and then my parents moved me when I was about 13 to Devon. And that's kind of when the bullying started, because, we moved to the middle of nowhere. I didn't speak like everybody else because I didn't have a Devonian accent. I hadn't been brought up with these children. And I also think to a certain degree, I probably put on a brilliant mask of coming across as being quite confident, which in hindsight, when I looked back, when I wrote my note to my younger self for the book, I think it probably came across as quite stuck up, to be honest.
Yeah.
So, what we think is our reality, 9 times out of 10, when we look back and look at it with a different lens, we can see something completely different. So I think not that anybody ever deserves to get bullied, but I have to put my hand up and, accept my part in that. I totally believe that all those pivotal moments, many of which are not particularly nice sometimes when we're going through them, are signposts to stepping into our full purpose and passion and our big why. You know, it's a case of kind of course correcting us every step of the way to where we're meant to go. So I never ever regret anything that's ever happened. I don't believe that there are mistakes at all. I just believe that quite often our outcome, what we think should happen, hasn't happened. So, you know, in reality, the right thing happens at the right moment.
Absolutely. So let's take the story back up. You're a nanny, you're in Georgia. What happens next?
Well, I got to the end of my university degree and knew that if I wanted to stay, either I had to get a scholarship with a company and be sponsored, or alternatively marry an American, and neither of them really appealed at the time. So I ended up coming back, and it was back in the days where the yellow pages were the big thing. And I remember going to my local library. I moved back in with my mum and dad, and I went to my local library and I pulled out the yellow pages in all the cities in England that I fancied living, and just contacted recruitment agents. And pretty soon I got a recruitment agent contact me, and they had a phenomenal job in import-export. So I imported goods from the Far East and would supply people like Hugo Boss, Coty Rimmel, Versace, Woolworths. You know, when you buy you buy a perfume and you get the free gift, we would design the free gift. So it was wonderful. I loved the job, absolutely adored it. And then I got headhunted, and you know, one would think that that was brilliant. I doubled my salary overnight. I was working in London, but to be honest with you, it was absolute hell. Hell. I hated it. I worked for a family-run business. They'd you know, gone under several times, which I found out once I was there. And I think really in hindsight, they were just after my little black book of kind of contacts. Once they got that, they made my life a living hell. And I ended up really depressed, going to the doctor and just saying, you know, you need to sign me off. I can't do that. And I didn't work after that for 6 months, because actually I just needed time to work out what it was that I wanted to do. And that was when it was just before then we'd moved house, and there was a lovely lady, one of our neighbors, who worked in pharmaceuticals, and she said, you know what, you'd be really good in pharmaceuticals. And next thing I know, I've got a job with GSK in their vaccines and anti-malarial department. So I educated nurses on travel diseases and malaria. So something completely different.
Wow.
But I did it for 5 years, and I loved it. I loved it because the nurses were just an absolute joy to be around. I mean, unbelievable joy to be around. They wanted to learn. They wanted to do the best for their patients. And I really felt like I was making a difference. And then I had my daughter, and actually the travel was too far. So I stayed within pharmaceuticals, but moved over to cardiology, and I did that for another 7 years.
Wow. So what did you do next?
Well, as I say, I went into cardiology, and when I was pregnant with my son, I had something called SPD, which is symphysis pubis dysfunction, where your pelvis starts to come apart. And I was in absolute agony. You can imagine. I was driving a lot to hospitals, you know, that were 2-3 hours away. I was on my feet. I was, you know, going around the ward, speaking to the consultants, and actually it became, you know, uncomfortable. And I was lucky enough to find acupuncture at the time, and it was really my saving grace to get me through that time period. But literally just after my son was born and I came back to work, my boss at the time handed me a CD version of The Secret, you know, the hit film The Secret. And it was just an audio. And I remember putting it in my car, and I was on my way to a meeting, and I literally had to pull over to the side of the road. And I sat there, and it was like somebody had turned on the Technicolor of the world. It was like all of a sudden the brightness of the world was just like, oh my goodness, this is like a whole different world. And I hadn't really, you know, I'd coached in my role in pharmaceuticals, but I hadn't really discovered personal development in any way, shape or form. And I literally just absorbed it all in. And one of the guys that really resonated was a gentleman called John Assaraf. And I went out and I bought his book, The Answer. And it's kind of like a workbook, and, you know, a little bit of his story. And part of the workbook was coming up with, you know, what your big why was, what your big vision is. And I remember my son was a great sleeper, but I had a period of 2 weeks where he'd wake up in the middle of the night, every single night crying. And I'd get back into bed and I think, I'm missing something. And on the last night that he cried, I got back into bed and I went, I know what I'm going to do. And literally got out of bed, started writing it down, and decided to set up a female-based concierge company for busy professional mums who needed to juggle the work-life balance. Because when I'd been ill with the symphysis pubis dysfunction, I'd contacted loads of agencies to help me do the housekeeping and the food shopping, and they could do one or the other, but they couldn't do a combined. And I thought there are women out there that just need to be able to juggle the work-life balance. They need somebody to come in and do their washing and ironing and do their housekeeping and go food shopping and prepare an evening meal so that when they come back, they can spend quality time with their kids. And so that's what I set up.
Fantastic. And how did you market that? What was your way of finding those clients, or did they just flock to you?
Well, interestingly enough, you know, the way that I'd set up the business was that I only hired mums to service the other mums and help, you know, provide that service, because mums just know. They just know what needed to be done at any moment in time, and they could go in and they would just do it, and they would see the bits that needed doing and they would just do it. So the mums, I offered a job opportunity to work in between school hours, because most mums want to be there for their kids at the beginning and the end of the day, and be there for those really important kind of school plays and sports days, etc. And then the clients I advertised in the Families magazine, which was, I think it's nationwide in the UK. Yeah. And the women started finding us, and we went from a team of 3 up to a team of 35 in 5 counties, with anywhere between 150 to 200 clients at any moment in time. And as the company grew and as the success went like that, I found myself working longer and longer hours, to the point that I became one of the women that I was wanting to serve. I was burnt out, I was exhausted, I was overwhelmed, I was lonely, working from home, because by this time I'd, you know, transferred completely over to being an entrepreneur. And I remember my coach one day said to me, I don't think your business is making you happy anymore. And I remember the words came out of my mouth before I had a chance to kind of stop them. And I was like, don't be so ridiculous, blah, 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 blah. And I got in the train to come home, and it was kind of playing over and over in my head. And I walked through the front door, and my family were all sitting there having dinner. And I sat down and I repeated what she'd said. And my little boy, who had kind of set the business up for, just went, Mummy, you're always so grumpy.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh my goodness, I can't do this anymore. And within a month, I'd packed the business, you know, down, and I'd walked away from it completely.
That's enormous, isn't it? And it's just that moment where you have that realization. And if you don't listen to it, you know, it's like the universe has very gently tapped you on the shoulder and said it's time to make a change. And if you don't listen at those moments, you might get a much bigger tap or a bit of a punch around the ear that says, you know, listen, you've got to do something different. So what did you do from that?
Well, I spent another 6 months just discovering who I was, because what often happens with women, especially women entrepreneurs, is we put everybody else first. You know, when we look at our to-do list, if we're even at the bottom, we're doing well. You know, if you're at the bottom, you know, pat yourself on the back and consider that you're doing a good job, but not a good enough job, because really we have to be at the top. A business is a representation of us. So if we're exhausted and overwhelmed, then actually that is, even if it's subconsciously, it's going out to your clients, to your staff, in your social media posts. It's going out there. We have to nurture and nourish ourselves first. And so that's what I spent time doing, is just getting back to the basics of being me. And I created a program called Simply You, which was just literally an 8-week program just of getting back to the basics of being who we are. And that was what I needed at that moment in time. And I remember sitting there not so long after closing the business down and thinking, well, what is it that I love doing? And I'd spent so much time and money on personal development, as my mind expanded and my thought process expanded. And I decided to go back to university and do a master's in applied positive psychology. And interestingly enough, as you said, the universe gives you what you need. And I remember I was due to do a Gestalt psychotherapy training. And then we found out that we potentially might be moving to Barcelona, and I couldn't do the course long distance. And within 2 minutes, a post came up from a positive psychologist, and I thought, oh, that sounds interesting, focusing on what's right with people rather than what's wrong. And I typed into the computer, and there were only 10 centres in the world that did a master's in applied positive psychology, and one was right on my doorstep. I mean, literally a half an hour drive away. And so I phoned them up. It was just before September, and they said, well, we've taken all the applications in, but let me book you an appointment. And that was on the Wednesday. And by the Saturday, I'd started the course and started doing my master's in applied positive psychology.
When it's right, it's right.
Yeah, it is. And we think we have to push and, do all these things, but we don't, you know.
Now, sometimes don't get disheartened if you think, I'm having to work really hard at this, it's not just falling in my lap, because sometimes that's what it's like. But if you're moving in the right direction, you're just taking all the steps to where you want to go. But just sometimes, like when I decided to make my move out from corporate into doing what I do now, immediately the opportunity came up to do it. And that could be a really lovely signal that, yes, you're moving in the right direction. So you completed your master's, and then what did you do?
Well, while I was completing my master's, so I started in the September, and we still lived in the UK at that point, and I went for a walk on Boxing Day. I woke up about 5 o'clock. It was pouring with rain. I needed to clear my head, as you can imagine, from the Christmas festivities the day before. And I went for a walk. I put on my rain jacket, my welly boots. I head out the door. And within 5 minutes of walking, I started seeing pictures. I started hearing voices. I started hearing questions. And I was like being bombarded. And I just thought, I have to write all of this stuff down. So I went home, sat in front of the computer and started typing. And it was like my fingers had a mind of their own. They just were going 19 to the dozen. And at the end of the hour, I remember sitting back and kind of looking at what I read. And it was all about women of contribution and the fact that absolutely every single woman on this planet can leave an impactful footprint when they step into being who they are and fully embracing the fact that they are more than enough just by being them. And actually that is their contribution to the world. But if they want to contribute further, if they collaborate rather than compete and share their God-given gifts, they can really change the world. And that was something that I was seeing, on a regular basis was, I was working with women, and one of the resounding things that kept coming up was, well, I have nothing to offer. And when I looked at what I'd written, there was also the Pay It Forward series Notes to My Younger Self book, which was all about that actually your story is contribution enough. Your story can change another person's life. Your life experience, whether it's good, bad, or all of those bits in between, can really make a difference to someone else. And it's normally those stories that actually we prefer to keep hidden that inspire and empower other people to step forward and make a change in their life. So literally within 6 months, the universe just literally went on overdrive. Two ladies from the hit film The Secret that I'd listened to in the car stepped forward. So we had Marie Diamond, who wrote the foreword for the first book, Marcy Shimoff from The Secret, who endorsed the book. I was invited to go to San Diego and be filmed for a documentary series on change makers. All of these things started happening. 18 phenomenal women stepped forward to share their stories. The therapeutic process of writing a note to, back to our younger self came through. And within a year of, getting this vision, we had a book that became an international bestseller. Everything kind of exploded. So it just goes to show, everything can change in a heartbeat, and actually things don't need to be difficult. I felt in my first business as an entrepreneur that if things weren't working, I just needed to work harder and longer. You do not at all. If things aren't working, I would always say, look at yourself and nurture and nourish yourself first, and then see the difference that sends out into the world. And, I'm living proof of that.
Fantastic. So this is Pat Duckworth, and I'm talking to Kezia Luckett today. And so I just want to dig a bit deeper now into your purpose, because you talked about your why. And I just want to know if you can sum up your purpose in life now, your reason to be on this earth, what would it be?
My reason for being here on the earth, and it gives me goosebumps every time I say it, is really to make sure that absolutely every single woman realizes the impact that she makes on this world just by being her. And we often diminish the effect that we have on people. Every day we're leaving like mini fingerprints or footprints around the world as we go, whether it's speaking like this on a recording, or whether it's opening a door to an older woman walking forward and giving her a smile, whether it's raising, beautiful children that will go out into the world and truly make a difference. Every single woman is leaving an impactful footprint. And when you realize that you're more than enough, and actually that you are destined for bigger things, and that you can be a woman of contribution just by being who you are, that to me is the thing that gets me out of bed every single day.
I can understand that. That's perfect. So tell me, what does success mean to you now?
Interestingly enough, I've just had this conversation recently because I remember when I first set my business up, I thought everybody would want my service and that I would be a multi-billionaire like within minutes of putting out that first ad. The reality is that entrepreneurship oftentimes isn't like that. We hear of these overnight successes, but many people have been working on their business, or at least themselves, for 10, 15, 20 years before that happens. Success in the past for me would have been kind of determined based on how much money I earned, the car that I drove, the clothes that I could afford to buy, the nice holidays, the good house, all of those things. Interestingly enough, we just had back in March our first conference called Destined for Bigger Things, and somebody asked me what the outcome of that would be. What would be a really good outcome? And I said, if women feel that their lives have changed through something that I've done, something that I've said, somebody that I've introduced them to, through reading some of our Pay It Forward Notes to My Younger Self stories, that to me is what success is about, is to be able to leave this planet knowing that I've made a difference to somebody's life. And at the end of the day, yes, I can say it does, it doesn't matter if it's just one person. Ideally, we're aiming, not just me, but as a collective, the Women of Contribution Movement collective is aiming to impact on 1 billion lives. If we can do that, if we can achieve that, which I know we can, that to me is success.
Yeah, fantastic. So if you had 1 or 2 tips for new entrepreneurs, what would you say to them?
I would say, firstly, always concentrate on yourself. And as women, that is sometimes quite a difficult thing to do, because we have that monkey chatter in our head that says we're selfish, that, it shouldn't be all about us. Well, actually, it's about being self-full. And when your bucket is full, then you can give. Women are very good at giving, but we're not very good at receiving. So we have to make ourselves our top priority. It will impact on your money earning potential, your health, your relationships, what your clients think of you, your children, everything. So focus on yourself first. And when it gets to the stage where you feel like you're pushing water uphill in your business, then I would say to you is just take a step back and assess whether or not the business that you're putting out into the world is the right one for you. Because my view is business shouldn't be hard. I'm not saying that you shouldn't work hard, but if you're doing what I did in my first business and working an 80-hour work week and feeling like there's not enough hours in the day, and that even when you're doing all this stuff, it's not bringing the revenue streams, the clients and all of those things in, as you deplete, so does your energy going out into the world. So stop. I think it was the Dalai Lama that said, somebody asked him how long you should meditate for. And he said, if you're feeling great, you should meditate for this amount of time. If you're not feeling great, you need to double, triple or quadruple that, so that actually, you feel better, so that you can put better energy out into the world.
Yeah, absolutely. So if people watching would like to find out more about you, how can they do that?
Well, we have the womenofcontribution.com website. For interaction, we have a Facebook group, the Women of Contribution Facebook group, or alternatively, they can jump on Amazon and purchase our Pay It Forward series, Notes to My Younger Self books. We have both volume 1 or 2, and actually be part of our movement. The nice thing about the books is once you've read the stories, you write your own little message of hope and inspiration in the front of the book. You put a post-it note on the outside that says, this book is for you, read it, love it, pay it forward. And then you leave that book for a stranger to find. And that's one of the ways in which we're impacting on 1 billion lives. It's sending out that ripple across the globe.
Lovely. I love that. I'm going to have to do that now.
And why not pay it? The Pay It Forward day is coming up towards the end of April. Definitely, grab 2 or 3 books and literally just go and put it out. The joy that it will give you, knowing that a complete stranger is reading your words of inspiration, is just unbelievable. It feels amazing.
There you are. I hope you're all inspired to do that. So thank you very much, Kezia, for talking to us today. And what have we learned? We've learned that it's really important in business to look after yourself. It's not always about your business. It's about your energy and how much energy you have to give to anything. So always looking out for yourself and listening out for those messages from the universe that say it's time to do something different. Perhaps, you've put a lot of time and energy into what you're doing and you really want it to be successful, but at some level it's not working, and you need to take that step back from it and think, well, what can I do differently and how can I be differently so that I can make this a success? And pay it forward. Find a way to pay it forward and help another woman. Just one woman at a time is going to make a difference. So I hope you've been inspired, and to all of our viewers, keep watching out for more of these interviews with wonderful entrepreneurs, and I'll see you next time.